As a flight attendant, what's the shadiest thing you've seen a passenger do? Shreepy writes. This incident happened on one of my flights from Hong Kong to Los Angeles. It's a 13-hour night departure flight and most of the passengers are the ones who are transiting out of Hong Kong. This boy and girl, both around early 20s, boarded early. They were both seated in my zone and I usually observe a lot during boarding to get an idea of what kind of passengers I'll have. The boy put his bag up immediately, but the girl was taking time and was expecting the boy to help her with the bag, which eventually he did, but the entire episode took a while, delaying the rest of the passengers. They both looked like a couple or people close to each other, so the scene was normal. During supper service I asked them if they wanted to drink something. The girl said to serve her white wine and serve the boy red wine, which I did. During tray collection, she again asked wine. When I saw their faces she looked normal, but the boy looked a bit red. I thought he didn't drink much, but he didn't have slurred speech. His eyes look normal, and he behaved just fine. After the service, the lights were turned off, since it was a night flight. The aircraft was now completely dark. I was routinely walking and monitoring the cabin, and saw them chatting and laughing loudly. She then asked me for another glass of wine for both of them. The guy at that time said, "I'm so wasted man, I feel I had too much." After I heard that I declined to serve him wine because he was not up to it and didn't want to drink. She, being smart, said that it's fine then only serve her a red wine. She was having white wine which I remembered. Since she wasn't drunk and seemed normal, I gave her a very small glass of red wine. After an hour or so, I saw this guy was deep asleep, but the girl was feeling a bit uneasy in her seat. I could see her grinding herself on the seat which looked abnormal. She started complaining that the cabin was too hot, and I saw the temperature was cool. We couldn't adjust the temperature more as it would disrupt the ambient atmosphere. She then pressed the call light. When I approached her I saw the boy had vomited all over his seat, on his face and all over himself. He was still sort of wasted, so I gave her the napkins, wet towels, water and plastic bag, so she could help him and wipe him a bit. I waited there, but, to my surprise, she just kept the towels and said, "It's okay, he is okay." To me he was certainly not okay, and at least needed to clean himself. I thought she would at least clean his face, seeing as they were a couple, but she didn't do anything. Before I could notify any other crew of this incident, I went to the washroom. Afterwards, I saw all my crew in her zone. When I went there I saw the girl in a nude bra. It looked something like this. Girl in a bra. Image source, Google. The crew told me that she had been roaming like this in the cabin. Luckily, since it was a night flight, all passengers were sleeping, but because it was dark it looked like she wasn't wearing anything. The crew had to force her to wear something on top. With all this noise, the wasted boy now woke up. Our crew could smell the vomit and alcohol everywhere around him. We asked him to change his shirt and clean himself. He was so embarrassed with the situation and informed us, in front of her, that he didn't know this girl at all, and they had only met for the first time at the boarding gate. For the remainder of the flight, even during second service, they did not look at each other. The girl was now in dark glasses, unwilling to talk to anyone, or eat anything in flight. Edit. To answer your questions. No, I don't know if they were drug mules, or carrying any drug or anything as such. Maybe they were just fooling around. The guy didn't seem like having any intention, but I'm not sure about the girl. Yes, both of them were Asians, and yes, Asians do have alcohol flush reaction as mentioned in comment. They can have that even on a single drink. The guy was drunk after 2 drinks. He woke up and vomited over himself, and after that he slept off again without cleaning himself. Maybe the girl had some intention and I'm no one to judge her, but if you are getting drunk and walking around the cabin in bra then it's certainly not allowed in aircraft. Some of you might think it's normal to be in aircraft cabin like that, but it's not. We don't expect passengers to dress up and board the aircraft, but we certainly don't tolerate people walking around in bra. It's an aircraft and not a beach, so you will be asked to put on some clothes. Gordon wrote, I'm not a flight attendant, but I travel a lot on business and I've seen my fair share of shady activities on flights. In seat-borne, I'm always shocked on long flights when adults choose R-rated movie content containing nudity or sex when seated in the same row as kids. But with the advent of Wi-Fi and iPads and laptops, the worst by far was a guy surfing porn or replaying downloaded files on his laptop. I have 3 kids, and when the 5 of us fly we typically sit 3 to a row with my wife and 2 kids and me, and my youngest at the island center leaving a window seat. On one flight a similar family of 5 sat with the husband and wife together, and their youngest daughter 5 to 6 between them. The oldest daughter looked to be about 13 to 14, and was in the aisle seat across the aisle from her father with her little brother who looked to be about 10 to 11 in the center seat next to her, and the guy with the laptop in the window seat in the same row as the older kids. I was seated behind the father in the aisle seat behind the parents, and across the aisle from the laptop guy. About an hour into the flight I got up to get my iPad from my bag to play games, and noticed that laptop guy had red wired earbuds in like the old Beats by Dre wired ones. He was watching movies full screen on his 14-inch laptop. He was either watching softcore porn or some simulated sex act in an R or NC-17 movie. I noticed the young boy in the center seat glued to the action on the adjacent laptop screen. I guess it was at that point his sister noticed that he was staring at the guy's laptop and glanced over to see what was worth staring at. She started a commotion elbowing her little brother. The 2 kids tussled briefly as I was getting my iPad and then settled back down. As I sat down I could see the daughter was now looking over at the laptop as well. It was all very inappropriate. The laptop guy seemed largely unaware of anything, choosing to focus on the movie or simply trying not to draw more attention to himself. After 30 to 45 minutes the guy put the laptop away and asked the kids to let him out to use the restroom. The young boy in the middle seat stayed in his seat, but the girl in the aisle seat got up and moved forward of the row thinking the man would be exiting the row to the rear, since that was where the coach cabin bathroom was. Instead he got up and rubbed up against the young girl as he maneuvered around her to help himself to the first class restroom. He was gone for 4 to 5 minutes, and during that time I could tell the little girl was upset by the unwelcome contact she had with the laptop guy. She watched the aisle for him to exit the restroom and nervously looked around not knowing what to do. When the guy came out of the first class restroom you could see the fear in her eyes as she looked around madly not knowing what to do and not able to say anything to her father. She popped up out of her seat and looked around. As he approached he had this smug grin on his face, like he was enjoying this. The girl glanced back at me and I motioned for her to step back my way. As she did, I got up and moved ahead of her row so her father couldn't see what was about to take place. The aisles were wider in this flight than most to where 2 adults could barely pass sideways. The man seemed annoyed that I would block his path and his view of the little girl. We both turned sideways and cleared the aisle face to face as we passed as I whispered to him, "You do that again, I'll duck and kill you." I enjoyed seeing the shock and fear in his eyes. I paused to watch him take his seat. The little girl waited to retake her seat, but I could tell from the look on her face that she appreciated the gesture. I used the restroom and returned to my seat. When I returned to my seat the laptop guy was looking out the window and refused to make eye contact with anyone. We landed about 15 minutes later. When deplaning the family of 5 left first, but laptop guy opted to remain in his seat. The little girl looked back as she left us to say thanks. I collected my things and left behind the family. As I left I stared down the laptop guy who was in no hurry to leave the safety and comfort of his seat. He finally looked away out the window again, and I exited the plane. Creepy guys like that are on every flight. If you are traveling with kids you have to be aware all the time. Parents need to be in every row with a kid and monitor adjacent passenger activities. Adam wrote, "Not a flight attendant, but on a Delta flight from Maui to San Francisco, my wife and I arrived at the gate an hour before departure. They told us it was a full flight and they would assign us seats when it was time to board. Okay, no problem. When it was time to board the plane, they gave us our boarding cards after most people had already entered the aircraft. They assigned us seats that were not next to each other, which to begin with is obviously annoying, but okay, we are just going to watch movies for 6 hours anyways, so we'll manage. We enter the aircraft. My wife's seat was a middle seat towards the back and mine a middle seat in the middle of the aircraft. As we are walking down the aisle, I see one empty seat between 2 morbidly obese elderly people. The man was in the window seat wearing an oxygen mask, and he was sitting with the oxygen tank on his lap. He must have been 300 pound plus, and was taking up his seat, spilling into the middle seat, taking up a good 1/3 of it. The woman was in the aisle seat, equally obese, taking up another 1/3 of the middle seat. As soon as I see that, panic starts to set in. That can't be my seat. I mean, there's just no way I can fit there. Turns out, it was my seat. I walked by, read the number, continue further down the aisle to a flight attendant, politely asking, excuse me, my seat is that middle seat, but obviously, I don't fit there. Is there any other seats available? Sorry sir, it's a full flight. You're going to have to take your seat now, so we can take off. But, look, how am I gonna fit? So you're going to go ahead and take your seat. I'm around 185 pounds on a good day, so I'm no small person, so there's just no way I was going to fit here. So I go up to the seats and ask the lady in the aisle, excuse me, are you guys together? She says yes. Okay, in that case, is there any chance she could scoot in and take the middle seat so I can sit in the aisle, as I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to sit between them. She looks at me and goes, no, we can't sit next to each other, and I have to get up often. Me, okay, but I'm not sure how I'm going to fit here. Are you sure, please? I don't mind getting up every 5 minutes if you need me to. She again replies, no. Okay, in that case I'm going to need you to get up so I can get into my seat, please. She gets up, I get in. I can't lean back in the seat because the man in the window seat is literally taking up 1/3 of my seat, and when he sat back down, so did she. So now I'm sitting leaned forward, kissing the tray table in front of me. The man looks at me, giggles and says, we were hoping for some kid to come sit between us, but you're no kid, yay no shit. At this point I'm in a weird state of fight or flight mode. What the hell are you supposed to do? I try to fasten my belt, but can't because I can't get to it with my neighbors both covering each a strap. A flight attendant came by, and the man goes, excuse me, can I have a seat belt extender for me and my wife please? The attendant says, certainly sir, and brings them each a seat belt extender. At this point, the passengers around me are all looking at us confused. I mean, are they serious? Am I going to fly for 6 hours like this? WTF. I then turn to the lady and tell her, listen, I don't fit here. This isn't going to work. You're going to have to switch with me. It's not fair that you and your husband purposely book seats like this knowing some poor sap is going to have a miserable time. I will get up as much as you want me to, but can we please switch? She angrily looks at me and says okay, so we switch seats. Phew. I now sit halfway in the aisle seat and halfway in the aisle, but fine, at least I can sort of lean back. Every time the cart comes by, I get a knee bashing. This is fun. About half an hour into the flight, the lady clicks the service button and a flight attendant comes over. She starts complaining that it's too hot in here, and if they can please lower the temperature in the aircraft. They tell her they can't do that, so she says that the seats aren't comfortable. If there's maybe some first class seats empty they could have. At this point I'm about to lose my shit. If anyone here deserves first class seats for their misery and struggles, it's sure as hell not her. But the flight attendant tells her that unfortunately it's a full flight, so no. Dinner service comes around. They both had to decline dinner service because the tray tables couldn't be lowered due to belly obstructions. A few hours into the flight, the man has to go to the toilet. The entire flight staff had to come and help with this, 2 people helping him, while a 3rd person carrying his oxygen tank. The ordeal took the better part of half an hour in which I had to just stand and watch this event unfold. At one point, a flight attendant walked up to me, kneeled down, handed me a chocolate bar, and said thanks for dealing with this. I took the chocolate bar, but all I'm thinking is, how do you guys allow this to happen? When we finally reached San Francisco they were both wheelchaired off the plane. I'm not mad at them as much as I'm mad at Delta for allowing something like this to happen, and then a little mad at them for their plot in booking separated seats hoping no one books the seat between them. When I walked off the aircraft the crew said thank you for dealing with this situation. Lastly, I'm a photographer, so please follow me on Instagram at Adamo. I like to complain about things in my Insta stories. Scott wrote, I have never been a flight attendant, but used to travel constantly for work. There were 3 incidents. that required police intervention. JFK to LHR. This was an overpass flight back in the day, when airplanes' entertainment systems consisted of a single projector. After the dinner service, the crew lowered the cabin lights, so we could all get some sleep. I was near the front of coach in the middle section. During the night we suddenly heard a woman shouting, "Get off me! Get off me!" He was imploring, "Stop it or we'll get in trouble." All eyes turned to see a man with his arms around her, like a hug, and her shouting at him. The cabin crew ran over, assumed the man was up to no good, and insisted that he let go over her. What they hadn't realized is that the woman was maybe having a panic attack. Once he let go over, she got violent. In the course of thrashing around, she cocked her elbow back to him and elbowed a flight attendant in the face. Now the man's pleas to stop it, or we'll get in trouble made more sense. An official, maybe the co-pilot, came back to alert the passengers that the captain had been notified and that police would be waiting for them at Heathrow. LHR to JFK. A daytime flight from London to New York. I was seated in coach. A woman traveling alone with her small son, maybe 3 to 4 years old, was a few rows behind me. She was wearing a bright orange leather jumpsuit and a guxy belt. During the flight the mother let her son roam around pretty freely. There were other kids on the flight, and he tried to befriend them. But he wound up hitting them all. The mother paid absolutely no attention. When the flight crew approached her about the problem she said, or did something bad enough, that the police took her into custody at Kennedy. LAX to Vegas. On a 7 AM flight, a group of 4 women are traveling together on Southwest, and had exceeded their carry-on limit. They were offering money to other passengers to take their excess bags, which were mostly large shopping bags from fancy shops. No one accepted their offer. They were pretty annoying, so my co-worker decided to antagonize them. He and the girls exchanged some playground name calling. When the flight attendant came by to ask about drink orders, we offered to buy those girls a drink. The flight attendant looked at them, looked at us, and said with a bit of an exhausted smile, "No way." The girls were in front of us on the plane, but stopped on the jetway to shout at the attendant. I walked past, watching them, as I waited for me friend to get off. Looking exhausted. Remember, this was her first flight of the day. The flight attendant finally said, "That's it. I'm getting security." As she passed by me, I asked if everything was okay. She kind of rolled her eyes, smiled, sighed, and said, "Yeah." By the time I got to the gate, security was already on its way to get the 4 women. Scene wrote. Looks like most everyone that already answered this is not a flight attendant, but that is understandable in the social media age. Who wants to lose their job over some silly Quora post? I'm not a flight attendant either, but years ago I sat next to one on a Boston LAX flight. There was an empty seat next to me in first class, and when there was no one left on the upgrade list, the airline put one of their own in the seat as she was heading to LA to staff another flight. She was a veteran flight attendant and super nice. In response to my "what are some of the weirdest things you've seen?" question, she proceeded to tell me a series of awesome stories for about 2 hours. My favorite? Back in the halcyon pre-9/11 days, she was a rookie flight attendant on a flight from the US to another country. Boarding the flight were several citizens of said country, clearly a family traveling together, and they were having real trouble putting a rather large duffel bag in the overhead bin. It was just too long and bulky/heavy to fit. They'd hoist it, and then it would fall. Or, once hoisted, they couldn't stuff it in the bin. And, when the flight attendant went to try to help, the family started shouting and waving their hands to move away, "Don't touch the bag," etc., etc. The closer she got, the louder they screamed, men and women included. So, the flight attendant stood watching, knowing at some point the family would have to give up and check the darn mega duffel. When, all of a sudden, the duffel fell to the aisle, again, but this time a human arm popped out of the zipper. Yep, it was a dead body. Made even more obvious when the head and neck popped out onto the lap of an already seated passenger, who then proceeded to scream in panic at the top of her lungs. Pandemonium ensued. Shrieking passengers, wailing and crying family members, in short, total chaos. Apparently, in the family's home country it was customary to bury loved ones within 24 hours of death, and they were trying to take grandpa home with them for burial. It was too expensive and time consuming to ship the body, and hey, they weren't going to relegate Gramps to the cargo hold, so. And no, the plane never took off. The ensuing brouhaha brought aboard customs officials, medical inspectors, airport police and of course airline staff to handle the, understandably, freaked out passengers. I then asked the flight attendant how the hell a family of 4 could lug a super heavy dead body duffel bag past the gate agents. Her answer, back in those days, the gate agents rarely did sh*t. They let the flight attendants on board deal with all the problems. Would never happen in that sad era we are in now. Her second best story, the venture capitalist traveling with his personal dominatrix. But that one writes itself. Chantal wrote, I'm not a flight attendant, but I was flying from Michigan to San Diego. I had gotten a seat away from my soon-to-be ex-husband, and I had gotten seated next to this old man. This man immediately made me uncomfortable, but I noticed he was with another nice-looking couple a few seats ahead of us. As soon as we took off, the guy told me that he was going to use the restroom. He was probably in his late 60s and had a glass eye, and if I remember correctly he had oxygen with him. When I say that I felt uncomfortable right away, it wasn't because of his looks. I just felt odd. One of those feelings you get for no reason in the pit of your stomach. Well, he had went to the restroom and had been gone for about 15 minutes. I'm not sure what made me get up and go looking for him, but I did. I talked to the flight attendant and told her I had an uneasy feeling and it was going away. Explained that he had been in there for quite a while and asked if we could check on him. We knocked on the door a couple times but no response. She then opened the door and to our horror he was in the middle of having a heart attack. The flight attendant didn't handle the situation well at all. She froze completely. I was trained in CRR, so I grabbed him off the toilet and laid him down. I began CPR. Then a doctor came running down and we pumped his heart. Unfortunately the man didn't make it, and I assisted them covering the body. When I went back to my seat, all of his things were there. I grabbed his phone and walked over to the old couple that he has boarded with. They had no idea that any of these events had occurred. I explained what had happened and that he did not make it. They both began to cry and said this was their last vacation they were all taking together. It was a sad moment handing over his phone. For the rest of the flight I drank whatever vodka was given to me and looked at the dead body behind me.